Republicans are continuing to back away from the Alabama Supreme Court's ruling that frozen embryos are the same as babies. The highest court ruled that a clinic's accidental destruction of frozen embryos amounted to the wrongful death of a child, and therefore set the precedent that these frozen embryos are the same as human beings. Now, look, I feel for the people who brought the case. I mean, that was one of their, you know, it was their hope that those embryos would be able to be used to have a family, to start a family. So I get it that they were mad, when this company accidentally destroyed them. That sucks. It's horrible. They deserve some sort of recompense. Unfortunately, the Alabama Supreme Court took the opportunity to inject religiosity into the ruling, and therefore create a law that unfortunately bans IVF in the state. So now, within a matter of days, it became apparent that this decision is going to make it very difficult for many people to get pregnant. In fact, multiple Alabama clinics, including one at the state's biggest hospital, had announced last week that due to the risk of criminal prosecution over the handling of embryos, they were suspending all in vitro fertilization services. Now think about that. People want families, they have a hard time conceiving, they turn to things like IVF in order to get pregnant. Now, you can't get more pro-life, pro-family than spending tens of thousands of dollars to be able to have a family. I get it. And look, the polls agree, okay? IVF is a popular thing. In a memo circulated among Republicans and obtained by the New York Times and Politico, GOP operative Kellyanne Conway's consulting firm said it found that a whopping 78% of voters who identify as pro-life support greater access to IVF. And polling from Pew Research also shows that 60% of Republican women say that health insurance should cover fertility treatments. I don't have any problem with that. I think that's great. And I think that's, again, the majority of Americans are like, yes, of course IVF is good. Yes, insurance should cover fertility treatments. That's great. If you want a family, you should be able to have that option to be able to have a family through these treatments. Now, that said, Republican politicians and these judges specifically kind of shot that in the foot because making frozen embryos the same as people will put doctors and companies at risk of being criminally liable if there happens to be an accident, a mistake, if something gets unplugged even, the freezer, or if the embryo, I could even see a situation that if that embryo fails to attach to the uterus, somehow that's the doctor's fault because you have just murdered a baby. That's a problem. As usual, Republican broad laws end up causing unintended consequences, or perhaps they were intended when you think about it. That said, Republican politicians are scrambling to put out a fire that they started. In the memo, which was sent on Friday, the Senate GOP urged its 2024 candidates to go all in on their support of IVF. In fact, here's what it said in the memo. Clearly state your support for IVF and fertility-related services as blessings for those seeking to have children, and publicly oppose such efforts to restrict access to IVF and other fertility treatments, framing such opposition as an offense of family values and individual freedom. Okay, I mean, look, it is family values, it is individual freedom, so's other reproductive care. They don't seem to understand that, though. Now, one politician who got the memo was Alabama Governor Kay Ivey, who said on Friday that she supports, get this, some couples hoping and praying to be parents who utilize IVF, and that she and GOP state lawmakers are working on a solution to ensure that we protect these families and life itself. Wait a minute, what did she mean by some couples? Well, we all know this, right? Her office wouldn't elaborate. But the some couples, straight cisgender. You know it. You know it. IVF happens to be a popular fertility treatment among same-sex couples, as well as people who are not part of a couple at all, who just want to get, to conceive with donor sperm or eggs. Again, that's how that works, okay? Now, Trump by the way, jumped into the conversation Friday saying the Republican Party will always support the creation of strong, thriving, healthy American families. Once again, you should put an asterisk by all of the Republicans that are saying stuff like this, that are defending IVF. Just note that it's IVF for only certain people. If they have a chance to cut gay people out, they will take it 100%, because you know it. Now, Trump called on lawmakers to act quickly to find an immediate solution to preserve the availability of IVF in Alabama. Okay, but how? Again, you really can't, and the problem boils down to you can't be pro-personhood at the moment of conception and pro-IVF. It doesn't work like that. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Sad. Baby, I know. Now, that said, hasn't stopped some Republicans from trying, like former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, who tried to have it both ways. I showed you the video on that on Thursday. She fell flat on her face, okay? Being for the Alabama ruling one day, and then later on that day, being like, well, you know what? I didn't say that I agreed with it. Yeah. That said, let's go to Democrats' response to this, okay? So now, Alex Floyd, the Rapid Response Director for the DNC, said in a statement, Republican strategists can tell their candidates to hide behind weak talking points all they want. But the reality is their extreme MAGA field would only further strip away women's reproductive freedom. This is true, and that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, that is the goal, that is the plan, to take control of women's bodies using reproductive, rights, or I should say taking away reproductive rights to make women essentially second-class citizens. Bring back the bad old days, all right? Look, the reason I say that is because it's very, very clear when you look at all the different decisions that they have made, okay? They've even also talked about going after birth control. In fact, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas wrote in his concurring opinion on Dobbs, what the decision that rolled back Roe, that the court should, quote, reconsider its longstanding rulings, including the 1965 Griswold v. Connecticut decision, that granted married couples the right to use contraception without the government coming in and having oversight. So, again, you want to talk about personal freedom, right? The ability to do your own family planning without big brother government watching you. I mean, that's freedom. That is a freedom that Clarence Thomas thinks we ought to revisit that. I don't agree with that position. Oh, really? Interesting. Now, following that opinion, by the way, Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn called the Griswold decision on contraception, quote unquote, constitutionally unsound. Oh, here we go again. You also have Republican Senator Mike Braun voicing his opinion that the issue of contraception and access to it should be left to the states, just like what's going on with Roe. Now, what you would have on that, I mean, is the same thing as what you would have right now with access to abortion. Some states outlawing it or drastically limiting it. Imagine limiting birth control, limiting condoms to only certain people, or just limiting them or removing them whatsoever. We're a pro-life state. Life begins at ejaculation, baby. That's it. I mean, the overall goal here. And by the way, there's more. In 2022, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene voted against the Right to Contraception Act, along with 194 of her GOP colleagues. Only 8 Republicans supported that. Of those 8, 5 are no longer in office. The year prior, Republicans rejected the Equal Access to Contraception for Veterans Act, a measure that would give women, veterans, access to the same no-cost contraception as non-veteran women. The bill eventually passed, but 181 Republicans voted against it. Yes, so they're after contraception. Why? Why? Oh, not only are they after contraception, they also don't want you to know that they're trying to ban it, because if you ask a Republican, they're going to be like, oh, of course we're not going to ban contraception. You're crazy. You crazy libs. But behind the scenes, You just have to look at what they're doing, the bills that they're voting on, and to not buy their BS excuses. Too vague. Now, here's the thing. These are all part of an effort to control women, okay? To control women, to control their bodies. That's it. Not only that, but it also reduces what little economic mobility the working class has left. Think about that. Children are expensive. Very expensive. Families are expensive. More kids means less money saved. Means more desperation among families looking to make ends meet. Which allows for companies, by the way, to come in, lower wages, because people will be so desperate to say no. Not only that, but what do you think this coincides with rollbacks of child labor laws. Because, think about it, more children, hey, more employees, more cheap employees. Let's start them out working young. So, yes, all of this is part of a plan to strip women's rights and to destroy the middle class, the working class, and to turn a great majority of Americans into essentially serfs. Not fun.